Greetings once again and welcome to my new calculus channel. So today I want to talk about Einstein's theory of relativity and the concept of time, which is very much at the core of his theories. Ironically, Einstein did not understand the concept of time, and that's pretty obvious if you try to ask any mainstream academic to give you a definition of time. They simply can't, and they'll wax eloquent about how it can be so many different things and about how it either exists or it doesn't, or it's real or it's not real, or that it's something that basically we don't have a full understanding of. But that's all absolute rubbish, as I'm about to explain to you. So, can time be dilated or contracted? And so in this article of mine, to which I'll place a link in the details section, I explain to you that in science an experiment has to be relevant. Okay, so if it's not relevant, obviously it's not going to answer the questions or the posited hypothesis. Okay, so this is especially true in the study of theoretical physics. I mean, the expression theoretical physics is itself an oxymoron because the properties, by the way, not laws of physics, do not change. Okay, so in the majority of cases, even the hypotheses are ill-formed. That is, you can create a hypothesis that is based on ill-formed concepts. And then whatever experiment you do with that hypothesis, basically you're going to end up getting results that are inconclusive, okay, insignificant, in whichever way you want to look at them. So time, as perceived by many of the planet's so-called brilliant minds, is not even a well-formed concept. Thanks to Einstein, Hawking, and others, the sum of all those who call themselves theoretical physicists have no clue what is time. So there is nothing but conjecture upon conjecture and ignorance on such a grand scale that every attempt at enlightenment is obfuscated by ill-formed concepts. So there have been many attempts to validate Einstein's theories, and every time the unfortunate conclusion is that his theories were correct. Well, in fact, they were not, but that has been the conclusion. Many ideas factor into experiments that address time change. And when I say time change, I mean time dilation or contraction. But before we can answer this question, we must first adequately answer the question, what is time? And in this article, which I'm not going to go through, I do that for you. You should study this article if you're a physicist as if your life depends on it, because anything you do with time and your understanding of time is not going to be reliable if you do not understand what is time. And so in this article, I, who am a genius, explain to you exactly what is time. So, by the way, Einstein had no IQ test. So I don't know why it is that so many people turn around and say he had an IQ above 160. I mean, how did they know? He never had an IQ test. So, time is a very well-defined concept. Time is a very well-defined concept, and contrary to the innumerable drivel that one finds in internet articles and videos, time has a well-formed definition, and it's simply this: time is a measure of a given distance traveled by an object at an almost constant speed. So it's not precisely constant, it's almost constant. So now you need to think about that statement very carefully, because if you talk about almost constant, can you even begin to talk about accuracy? I don't think so. So what came first, you may ask, distance or time? Well, the short answer is that distance came long before time. Okay, so we realize distance before we realize the concept of time. It has to happen in that order because time is defined in terms of distance. And if you read my article here, you'll see how. Okay. And so there were quite a few experiments, and each of them keep on supposedly verifying Einstein's bogus theories. The very first one was, I think, in 1919, and it was called the Eddington experiment. Now, this experiment had nothing to do with time directly. it was based on gravity. Okay, so I mean, now what, we don't even know what gravity is exactly. It could be, all we know is that it's a force of some kind, of some origin. Okay, and my theory is that gravity is caused by physical matter and the motion thereof. And you may retort that gravity is even present between two stationary objects, to which I'll retort that no object is stationary in a moving universe, not even at the smallest so-called infinitesimal level. I don't believe in infinitesimals, but there you have it. So yes, you may say, well, my theory is also just a theory, and I do not claim that my views are provably right. However, they are also not provably wrong. So aside from the experiment being based on an ill-formed concept, the Eddington experience, there are other possible reasons for the light-bending phenomena, least of which is an optical illusion. So I'm a mathematician, and it's possible my opinions are not correct in this respect. But my IQ is above 160. Einstein never had an IQ test. Okay, so I'm carrying on about IQ here as if it means much. It doesn't. But if you want to throw in irrelevant claims about Einstein's intelligence, the end result is always nonsense. Okay, inconclusive opinions and results, which are basically, yeah, nonsense. Okay. Then the next experiment was the, I don't know how to pronounce that name, Heffel-Keating experiment. This experiment concerns two apparently accurate atomic clocks. And now one question that immediately arises in a genius mind, like mine, is this: can any clock be accurate in its measure? What does accurate mean in measure? Okay, can accuracy be quantified meaningly? It turns out that accuracy depends more on perspective than science. In the physical world, there is always error in measure. Therefore, scientists attempt to measure accuracy in terms of error. And this process is like the Ouroboros. It's entirely circular, for in order to talk about error, we must first determine what it means to be accurate. So you might say accuracy is based on constantness, but then it's quite clear that the motion of the universe, in particular that of the Earth's rotation, our definition of time, by the way, of time measure is based on the Earth's rotation. So in particular that of the Earth's rotation is anything but constant, because the Earth's rotation is anything but constant. And you know, we've got many articles on this. Here's one: the Earth's rotation is changing speed. Should we be worried? And this is a very recent article. Okay, and my claim is that it always changes speed. All right, and the reason for that is that no one day is exactly equal to another day, but they're almost constant, right? So therefore, since there is no accurate standard and the time anomalies are of such small magnitudes, how can anyone claim they are significant? How can you claim any theory significant based on such small magnitudes when you can't even measure them properly? And yet this is the driving force behind all of Einstein's theories. In my above mentioned article, I explained why there are time anomalies. In this article here, what is time? Okay, this article, what is time? I explain why there are time anomalies. So these have nothing to do with the nonsense of time, space, gravity, curvature of space-time, etc. The explanation is crisp and precise. The time anomalies noticed are a result of the change in the almost constant speed of the Earth and other objects. So in this illustration here, I show how some basic facts about how the Earth rotates and how satellites rotates. And this shows you a picture of two clocks, one based on Earth, which is A, and one based on B. And it gives you a few facts about how these clocks move and how they cover distances. So the gist of this is that there is nothing suspicious if two clocks start out at the same time. It's pretty obvious that the clock on the faster object will show less time elapsed over the same distance. Okay, so that doesn't mean that time has changed or the measure of time has changed. That's entirely garbage. So why do clocks in space have to be synchronized with clocks on Earth? Because the almost constant speed of the Earth means that each rotation will not occur in the same time. Thus, Earth time itself is not exact. So both clocks work on a constant calibrated Earth time. It's not truly constant, but it's almost constant. Okay, and that calibrated Earth time is that it's the distance the Earth covers of 463 meters, which is equivalent to 1 second. Okay, that's what 1 second means. It means the distance of 463 covered by the Earth's speed of 463 meters per second. That's all 1 second means. So if clocks could recalibrate precisely for each rotation, then there would never be any difference between the clocks. This is impossible because all measure is done using approximations. We've never used those bogus objects called real numbers that my intellectual inferiors in the mainstream believe in. There is no such thing as an irrational or real numbers. Therefore, there will inevitably be time anomalies. They're not actually time anomalies. They're perfectly explainable. Okay? So, you can't calibrate clocks precisely. There is no such clock. Not even atomic clocks are calibrated precisely to Earth time. So thus, if we cannot draw any sound conclusions about Einstein's questionable claims, which of the following two options is true? A. His theories must be correct because he was a genius and lesser mortals simply cannot understand. Or B. His theories are nonsense because they are beyond rational explanation. What's your choice? I'll leave it up to you. Time change implies that measures change. Time change implies that measures change, which is a paradoxical statement. If the magnitude being measured changes during the measure, then how reliable can such measure be? Okay, it's garbage. So if clocks could recalibrate on the fly for each small change in the Earth's rotational speed, or some time reference, which could be another planet, or the head nodding of a sufferer of dystonia, a dystonia sufferer, then there would never, in theory, be any difference in measure between the clocks. That time, or the measure, can be dilated or contracted is as absurd as it sounds. It makes no sense because it's nonsense. So I hope you've learned something from that. I will put links to all these articles in the details section. And I mean, you can do a search on the internet to see all the garbage that is repeatedly claimed. I mean, why would, if Einstein's theories were even remarkably correct, why is it that they're constantly having to be verified? I'll tell you why. It's simply due to the reason that those people who call themselves physicists and theoretical physicists have no clue what they're talking about, okay? In other words, they're morons who are perceived as geniuses. And theoretical physics, as I said earlier on, is itself a oxymoron because physics is fixed and it has its properties, not laws, by the way, because laws would imply that somebody decided it was going to be so and that's how it was. Okay. So, and then of course you'll have so many explanations of special relativity, and I mean, you can read all these explanations and instantly red flags appear in my mind. I mean, so for example, in this first paragraph it says, in order to attempt to prove this theory, two very accurate atomic clocks. Now when I see something like very accurate, that's a first red flag. It's a first bullshit detector. Okay, I mean, even if I don't see very in front of accurate, if I see accurate, I'll also have a trigger, because there is, I mean, accurate is really relative, excuse the pun, and it's circular because it requires error and error requires accuracy. So atomic clocks were synchronized and one was taken on a high-speed trip on an airplane. And when the plane returned, the clock that took the plane ride was slower by exactly the amount of Einstein's equations predicted. Well, that's actually false because most people who claim they understand Einstein's equations, especially those that normally go by the name of Maxwell's equations, do not understand them. They have a very weak understanding of mathematics and calculus in particular, which by the way is flawed, as I proved by discovering the new calculus, they have no clue about these facts. So, I mean, every sentence triggers a bullshit flag. And you can see many sites like this in many videos. And one funny video is by Sabine Hessenfelder or something like that. Sabine Hessenfelder, in which she talks about time and time contraction. Very well then, I think I've spoken enough on the subject. I'm John Gabriel, and if you're not already a subscriber, become a subscriber to my channel, spread the news, and contribute in terms of credits or currency. And that, my friends, is all for this video. Till next time, this is a new calculus channel. I'm John Gabriel. Goodbye.